Hello, hello. Give me just a second to pay attention to I have to admit people in. I don't know how to change that, so I'm just going to keep an eye on that for just a sec. But hello, everyone. Feel free to use the chat box at any time during the live Q&A if you have follow-up questions or if questions arise from answers. And you can also notice in the chat box, you can message me directly or you can message publicly where it says everyone. Could someone let me know real quick if the sound is okay? I've got a fan in here and baby chicks in here, so I don't know if that's muffling or not. I'm going to move this light a little bit. Okay, thank you. That light is still glaring pretty bad. One more time. All right, whatever. Okay. Oh, one more person joining. Let me get my questions pulled up here. So this was not a question that someone asked, but I feel like it's been coming up a lot, which is anytime we talk about a medicinal plant in the Discord chat room where we talk about plant identifications and how to use plants, etc. A lot of people will say, I really want to use, let's just say St. John's wort. Actually, that wasn't the example I had in mind. Solomon seal root came up recently. But I can't find it in the wild. If I buy seeds online or if I go to a nursery, is every variety of Solomon seal going to be medicinal? The short answer is no. And this question also gets brought up a lot with plant families. For example, the aster family, the mint family, the rose family, those are like kind of the three most popular plant families that have tons of medicinal plants in them. And a lot of times, if we're talking about a plant in the aster family, I'll get a ton of questions like, is this variety of aster the same? Can this be used the same? I did a video recently on TikTok on fleabane, and a ton of people were asking if purple aster, western aster, all these different asters could be used the same. And there's some interesting stuff here. Again, short answer, no. However, if you become super familiar with a plant family, like the mint family, for example, has, obviously mint, catmint, skullcap, lemon balm, all these plants that we really love to use. And if you mountain mint, if you take a look at all those plants and what they do for us medicinally, there are a lot of similarities. And the base to that is that, most mint family plants are incredibly aromatic. They have a very high concentrate of volatile oils. And so naturally, those, what we know about plants that are incredibly aromatic and rich in volatile oils is that they're typically quite bitter. So we can draw the conclusion that most mint family plants are pretty bitter. And therefore, we can draw the conclusion that most bitters act a certain way in the body. So yes, a lot of mint family plants are going to have very similar actions. However, there's also major differences. I don't want to misspeak, but something came up a couple years ago with a client I was working with that had hypothyroidism. And I feel like I might accidentally get this backwards, but I'm almost positive I have it right. Lemon balm is not recommended for people with hypothyroidism. However, catnip, catmint can be used just fine. And those are both herbs, tonic herbs that are mildly sedative, relaxing. They can do similar things. They're both in the mint family. However, one of them has contraindications. So we can draw some similar conclusions about plants in the same family, genus, different varieties, etc., but there's still going to be major differences. So my recommendation would be, let's say you're wanting to use Solomon seal root. You find a variety at your local nursery and you're wondering if it's medicinal and can be used in the same way. Go ahead and look it up. Um, Thank you. Go ahead and look it up just to make sure. For example, there is a false Solomon seal root, which is still medicinal but can't be used in the same way. There is like giant Solomon seal. There's a Chinese variety that grows locally around here, and like half of them can be used interchangeably and half of them can't. So it's just a good idea to look up the exact kind just to double check. Then there's plants like calendula. There are a ton of different varieties of calendula that have been man altered to be bigger, brighter, different colors, smellier, etc. And they're still going to have those same amazing medicinal properties that calendula has. They've just been slightly altered to change the color, the scent, etc. So, without getting way too confusing, um, one thing that you can ask yourself if you're in a nursery looking at, let's use the calendula example, and you're wondering if it can be used in the same way, how different is it from calendula? You know, if it's like red booty Johnson's golden marigold and it's like looks completely different, smells completely different, that one's probably not going to be as close as like what is there's a really common variety a lot of farmers use that's like kind of a reddish orange, but that one looks almost identical to the most common marigold. Another thing is uh calendula marigold, sorry, I'm using that word interchangeably. Those are very sticky plants, and that sticky property of calendula is really what we're after. So if you squeeze a calendula bud that isn't super sticky, then it's probably not going to be as medicinal, if that makes sense. So, those are just some things that you can look for if you don't have access to the internet, if you're at a plant nursery or looking at seeds. But if you do, I encourage you to look it up because a lot of herbalists have done that research for you if scientists haven't. For example, anemone, I've said it. I've said anemone for so long, and people always correct me, so I'm trying to change it up. Anemone, um, there has not been a lot of studies on the use of it medicinally. However, because of other herbalists who have done studies, we know that it can be really wonderful medicinally. And because there haven't been any like isolated scientific studies, they haven't isolated different varieties. But if you look up which varieties of anemone can be used medicinally, one of the first things that's going to pop up is one of my favorite herbalists, Seven Song, because he took it upon himself to do that research himself. So he grew, I think it was 7 different varieties of anemone. He tinctured all of them, and then he used them in an isolated way, like for, you know, used one every day for a month or something like that. And then wrote down his findings. And I like to always remind people this because I think that, like, a lot of times in our minds, and this is not your fault, this is living in a capitalist society where we're constantly being told that we're stupid or wrong and we need to pay professionals. Science is anytime you are observing something and making a guess on the conclusion based on your observations over time. So you are a scientist. Seven Song, doing those studies at home, is a scientist. I still consider that a scientific study, even though it's not a published one on PubMed. Of course, reader discretion advised, but it's a very cool thing to think about. I tell this story a lot and I'm not going to dive into it, but there is a plant that grows wild near me called dog fennel. It's a type of wild fennel. There have been 0 research studies done on the edibility or medicinal uses of this plant. However, it's beautiful. It smells so great. It tastes so great. It looks and tastes just like fennel. So Francesco and I started using it in very teeny amounts, just to see, observe how our bodies reacted over time. And we really took note of that. We didn't mix it with other herbs. And we realized that, like, our bodies reacted really well to it. It did good for us. And so we started cooking with it and using it more. and it's been great. So just remember, you are a scientist, and nature will typically tell you. I think people also forget that a lot. I've got a question coming up about comfrey where I'm going to get more into this, but a lot of times there are really big red flags in nature. For example, elderberry. The elderberries do have some toxicity to them, but that toxicity, same with pokeberries, is primarily in the stone seed pit in the middle of the fruit, stone fruit. And what does stone fruits naturally tell you? When you bite down on a berry that has a stone pit in the middle, it hurts like hell. And so you naturally spit it out. You're not going to chew that thing up. It's hard as a rock. So guess what? If you're eating elderberries or pokeberries and you're spitting the seeds out, you're fine. If you're taking handfuls of those berries and you're just swallowing those hard seeds, yeah, you're going to ingest some of that toxicity, and you really have to eat a lot of them for that to even bother you. And again, these are not super tasty raw at all. So you're probably not going to eat a ton of them. So there's lots of these like big red flags in nature that tell you what you need to do. So of course use caution, but don't be too scared. Alrighty, next question. I know you've talked about several of your tinctures helping manage incredible amounts of stress. Habituate has saved me. But I was wondering if you make anything or have any ideas for when you're out of the super stressful traumatic situation, but working with your body to process and deal everything that it entailed. This is a beautiful question. And yes, absolutely. So, for those who don't know, there is a video that you can search on my YouTube or Patreon from last year called How to Let Herbal Remedies Change Your Life. And in that video, I talk a lot about tropho-restorative and nervine herbs and adaptogens. Three categories of herbs that are really, really helpful for when you're undergoing intense amounts of stress or trauma or anything really heavy that's like affecting you mentally so much that your physical body starts to react as well. And that's a wonderful video for helping you through those types of situations. But what this person is asking is, what can I do to help my body and mind recover on the other side? Um, this is such a good question. So, last year, when we were talking about remedies for COVID, something that was coming up a lot was like, let's say you get COVID, you deal with the horrible respiratory issues that come along with that. Well, then you recover from COVID, meaning your tests are coming up negative, you're not quite feeling the symptoms as much anymore. Well, your body has just gone through insane amounts of trauma. Same with if you get a flu or anything that lasts longer than a week, your body is having to really change and adapt to fight those viruses and things off. So there is a recovery period. And when it comes to COVID and just respiratory health in general, we talked a lot last year about how reishi mushroom and cordyceps in particular is incredible. Same with lobelia, can't miss that one, for helping recover lung health. So if your lungs and your small airways have gone through significant trauma, those are herbs that can really help to mend and heal those tissues and just bring it back to its vitality. So in this particular question, I'm sure this person has used a lot of tropho-restorative, nervine, and adaptogen herbs to get through that stressful, traumatic situation. As she mentioned, she used our habituate tincture, which is full of all three of those categories. Now that she's on the other side of the stressful, traumatic situation, herbs that you can take to help you recover are going to be really softening herbs, because this is going to be a little bit of a combination of like literal and spiritual sides to this. But when you have gone through long periods of stress or trauma, your body has had to quite literally harden off. Your body has had to signal to the different parts of it, yo, we're going through this crazy thing, like get with it, we got to manage this stuff, all systems boot, like come on, crank it, let's protect this body. And that's a lot of energy and a lot of work. And so when you're on that other side of it, you need to help your body send all those same signals back again of like, okay, everybody, we're good. Let's chill out. Like, stand down. I think life is like going to get a little easier now. And so, some of my absolute favorite herbs for that: hawthorn, motherwort, rose, chamomile, linden, passion flower, lemon balm. These are all very soft, gentle herbs that are not going to, they're very supportive, but they're not going to be those like signal callers. Like some stronger things like California poppy, kava, skullcap, you know, a lot of those nervine herbs that you're using when you're going through the stress are. So I would definitely recommend making a blend of a couple of those herbs. Rose is one of the most softening, gentlest herbs there is. I make a blend every summer in June because the herbs are out in June. It's our strawberry moon tincture. It's got wild dog rose, mimosa flower, and those are both tinctured, and then wild dog rose, mimosa flower, honey with like a little bit of cardamom and cinnamon. That to me is the most like softening formula ever. Um, we also have a blend called Heartmend, our tincture, that's got hawthorn berry, motherwort, hibiscus, rose hips, ginger. That's another good like recovery blend. Passion flower is such a sweet, gentle one, and chamomile as well. And then the other cool thing about these herbs, they're not only helping to re-soften and soothe and mend, but your, like I mentioned, your physical body is also going through a recovery period, because when we're undergoing a lot of mental stress or anxiety, your body has to really catch that and manage it. And so there's a lot of changes that happen, like people under frequent stress typically get constipated and have some gastrointestinal issues that arise. Ulcers come about with major stress, all these different things. And so these herbs that I just mentioned, did I say Tulsi? Because that's another really good one. Rose and Tulsi, if you don't have mimosa in your area, is another wonderful, gentle recovery blend. Um, but that said, Tulsi, chamomile, linden, hawthorn, lemon balm, motherwort, rose, passion flower, not only are those herbs going to be awesome for like that softening and soothing, but those are also incredible herbs for helping support those different systems of the body that could get disrupted under elongated periods of stress. Okie dokie. Next question. Will you weigh in on the internal use of Comfrey debate and where you personally stand on it, how you came to that decision, etc.? So I think I'm going to need a sip of water before this one. My water bottle is decorated with nervine stickers from Field Day and Friends. Okay, so for those that don't know where this question is coming from, I'm going to read something to you real quick that is from the Herbal Academy. I don't know how to pronounce this word, so after I try to pronounce it once, I'm just going to say PAs. But certain types of pyrrolizidine alkaloids, or PAs, are known hepatic and genetic toxins. Despite the toxicity, studies have also revealed that some types of PAs have beneficial pharmacological properties such as antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, and anti-HIV activity. So the reason that taking Comfrey internally is up for debate is because it has a very high amount of those PAs. Topically, you're totally cool. The debate is strictly internally. But Comfrey has some really incredible things to offer when taken internally as well. And some other herbs that fall under this category that I'm sure you all have heard about borage, arnica, even echinacea. Those are all herbs that colt's foot is another one. Great topically, have a ton of good things internally as well, but they do have levels of PAs that are up for caution, basically. So some more from Herbal Academy. Some other amazing topical plants that are not recommended internally, such as arnica and borage, also contain PAs. Not all PAs are toxic. Depending on their molecular structure, PAs can be either saturated, such as those found in arnica and echinacea, or unsaturated, such as those found in borage and comfrey. Saturated PAs are considered non-toxic or less toxic, while unsaturated PAs are considered toxic. So here's the interesting thing. There have been studies done on taking comfrey internally, and arnica and borage and those other ones. However, those studies were injecting insanely high concentrated amounts into mice, tiny little mice. The amounts that they were injecting into the mice were amounts that no human would ever take. And so at this point, there really are not any clinical studies showing that there's a link between PAs and liver toxicity when comfrey is taken at a normal dose by a healthy human. So that said, use at your own discretion. And this is what I meant when I was talking earlier about how I feel like plants are really good at giving you these signals of like, hey, don't use a lot of me, or don't use me for very long. Well, if you've ever touched or seen comfrey, some people call it cowboy toilet paper. It's not fuzzy like, Mullen and Lamb's ear. It's rough like sandpaper. And so it's also not tasty. It's just like not very appetizing for taking internally. So you're probably not going to be like chugging massive amounts of comfrey internally. Most of the time, if you're taking comfrey internally, there's a very specific reason, and you're probably going to be, forcing it down like some other medicines, where when we really need them, we just kind of force it through. So my personal opinion is that you're not going to ingest the amount of comfrey that you would need to for it to be harmful. So I'm not that worried about it. That said, there are other herbs that you could use to get the same job done. So if you would rather err on the side of caution, just don't use it internally. I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to say. I talk about this in a podcast interview I did with Philippe, our Numinous Nature. And what that is we ingest wild plants a lot. And Augustine, my son, has been ingesting wild plants since he was 2. And Augustine has an insane palate for a child. He is very into bitter plants. He like flavors that some adults just can't even handle. Augustine loves and doesn't even really, they don't faze him at all. And that's because he's been eating things like wild garlic mustard, nettle, violets, pine tips, etc. his whole life. And that said, things like I mentioned earlier, Francesco and I ingesting the wild dog fennel over time, I trust myself at this point to take a very small amount of something over time to see how my body does with it. That said, a lot of the dangers in nature, such as like super high tannins, super high PAs, etc., your body can adapt to those. So if you're taking really small amounts of things like black walnut, raspberry leaf, oak, comfrey, things that are super high in those over time, your body is slowly learning what to do with it. Whereas if you never ingest things like that and you down a quart or more of comfrey, your body might be like, whoa, what are we doing? So that's just something else to keep in mind. If you're like super committed to eating wild plants and trying different herbs for different things, that might be something to consider. When we're going on hikes and stuff, we will take, you know, some pine needles or whatever sort of wild thing that's out there that's flavorful and nibble on it on our walk. And even just those juices of that plant being secreted into your mouth, those bitter components activating in your saliva, the mucosa, so much is happening in your body that's responding to that. And it's really cool. And I think it's really good for you. Okay. Next question, facial steam for rosacea / sensitive skin, any simple recipes? So I'm going to give you my favorite herbs for rosacea, but I'm also going to say I personally would recommend doing masks over steaming for rosacea. And for sensitive skin. Steaming is wonderful, but it's a little tricky because you can overdo it and sort of singe that top layer. And with rosacea and sensitive skin already being so easily irritated, you really want to soothe your skin. So a mask might just be a better choice for you. My favorite herbs for rosacea are oatmeal and milky oats, the stems, what do they call that? Oat straw, anything oat. Lavender, chamomile, green tea, feverfew, licorice, tiger grass, marshmallow, blue tansy, and tremella mushroom. Tremella mushroom is probably at the top of my list for that. We make a serum for rosacea and sensitive skin called Idune Blue Tansy Serum, and it has most of those herbs I just mentioned, except the tremella mushroom because it's not water soluble. However, we used to make a mask, some of you might remember, and I promise I'm planning on bringing it back soon. It's basically the Idune Blue Tansy Serum in mask form with a base of tremella mushroom and Irish sea moss. Both of those ingredients are really slimy. They retain a ton of water and are more easily absorbed by your skin than hyaluronic acid. So tremella mushroom, incredible for water retention, sensitive skin, moisture, soothing, calming, etc. Another great ingredient is barley. So barley, tremella, oat, those are probably at the top of my list. Marshmallow root, burdock, those will also give you that sort of like slimy mucilaginousness of the tremella mushroom and the Irish sea moss. Also, glycerin is kind of always up for debate, but I think glycerin is amazing for sensitive skin because it's going to help lock those ingredients into your skin. So just throwing that out there. A really wonderful, very simple mask recipe for you might be honey, powdered oats, and coconut milk. That would be wonderfully soothing. I also tried a mask the other day from Sweetgrass Trading Co. that had a native corn masa, ground corn, chamomile, and lavender. And that was incredibly soothing and cooling. So that would be another really, really great option. Next question. Do you have any medicinal plant sourcing suggestions? I live in a city, so I can't grow my own, and I haven't quite figured out places to forage yet. I order most of my herbs that I can't get locally from my local farm, which is Harpeth Moon Farm. They do not ship, but some of these other some of the other farms I'm about to mention, they do ship fresh herbs and freshly dried herbs. So these would be my top choices. Crystal Organic Farm, Foxtrot Herb Farm, Among the Oaks, Black Locust, Stone Meadow, Sawmill. And by the way, these all have herb farm at the end. I just didn't want to say that over and over. So like Among the Oaks Herb Farm, Black Locust Herb Farm. And then if you can't source them fresh for whatever reason, Star West Botanicals, all organic. That's one of my favorite places if I need to get dried herbs. But also herb farms are something that was so impossible to find just 2 years ago. And now they're popping up left and right. So These are farms that are closer to me in the Southeast. You might, especially if you're in California, just look into your local herb farms. And a lot of them even do CSAs for people that want to work with fresh plants. And a lot of times, if you go to your farmer's market, excuse me, vegetable farmers will grow like medicinal and edible herbs. Or you might see someone there selling starters and herb plugs. And so that would be a good person to ask about sourcing from. I also have a highlight in my Instagram. I think it's either under ethical foraging or my frequently asked questions, where I not only tagged all the farms that I just said, but I also talk about places where you can forage and how to find that information. Okay, do you have any suggestions for figuring out which plants mix well together? I'm thinking of making my first tea a mix of cramp bark, ironweed, and maybe vitex. So, wonderful question. Basically, this person is asking, how do you formulate? There's a few simple rules to formulation. I typically go by energetics. Not everybody does, and you don't have to. The main rule of thumb that people use is, what is your key ingredient or ingredients? So, like, if you were to use Vitex, that would be your like key active ingredient, because Vitex is really good at what it does. It's a strong one. It does its thing. Then you've got cramp bark, which is really going to be pretty supportive for the Vitex. Hold on, let me finish this other thing. So the rule of thumb, what is your active key ingredient? What are your supporting ingredients? What are your balancing ingredients? And what are your catalysts? So that's 4 things: key, supporting, balancing, catalyst. So like I was starting to say, your key ingredient here would be your Vitex. Your supportive ingredient would be cramp bark. Cramp bark is great at what it does. But Vitex is a little more focused. Vitex is pretty specific. It doesn't have as broad a use, whereas cramp bark has a pretty broad amount of uses, but it does have some components that are very supportive of hormone balancing. So that's going to support your Vitex. And then ironweed is a tonic herb, meaning you can take lots of it. It's super broad. It's great for you, but it's not very specific, and it's not like very powerful. But it is tasty, slash it's not tasty, meaning some herbs are just gonna downright not taste good at all. And so you might use a more tonic herb like chamomile, that's not necessarily delicious, but it has a much more mild flavor that's going to help like balance that out. And then if you wanted to add a catalyst herb, which is the last thing here, catalyst, think about your like finishing touch when you're seasoning a soup or flavoring a cocktail. A catalyst is going to be things like a pinch of cayenne or black pepper, a little ginger, a little turmeric, a little honey or sugar or maple syrup. So if you wanted to add a catalyst herb here, you might add something like rose hips, hawthorn. There's something I'm trying to think of. Hibiscus. What is that berry? Anyways, meaning it's going to add a little more flavor. It's very broad, right? Like rose hips, hawthorn, hibiscus, those do a lot of things and they're tasty. I hope that makes sense. Other things that are going to weigh in here are especially with tincturing. I know you said you're making a tea, but with tincturing, a good balanced formula is going to not only have herbs for immediate relief, but long-term relief. So since you're talking about a hormonal blend, I'm going to use our moon cycle sync formula as an example. There are about 8 to 10 herbs in our moon cycle sync formula. That's definitely on the high end. I really don't like to go above 8 to 10 herbs, but our moon cycle sync is such a complex formula that not only helps to regulate your menstrual cycle, but to help, hello, Mabel, to help with the symptoms of an irregular menstrual cycle. So it's got some key herbs in it, such as it has vitex berry, and then it's got some supporting herbs. Mine also has cramp bark. It's also got like dong quai, eleuthero root, lady's mantle, etc. Then it's got some balancing herbs such as ginger, burdock, some other stuff. And then it's got like honey, cinnamon, things to make it tasty. So it's got the catalyst herbs as well. Other things that you need to think about. How much of a certain herb do you need for it to be effective, / how much of a certain herb is too much and could potentially be dangerous. For example, I make a formula called Lung Mend that has one of my favorite herbs in it, lobelia. You can take too much of lobelia. It's not going to hurt you, long term really, but it will make you vomit. It has some not comfortable effects to taking too much of it. So in my Lung Mend formula, if you're looking at a 1 ounce bottle, there are, I think, 5 ingredients in that bottle. Lobelia is the very smallest amount in that formula because you don't want to take too much of it. You also don't need very much of it. It's super powerful. It's the active ingredient in that formula. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then, I could really go on and on and on this topic. So I'm trying to prioritize here, but think about how it's working in the body, what functions these herbs are having over your body, because you really don't want too many contraindicating herbs that are doing opposite things to one organ, if that makes sense. Trying to think of an example here. So that's really where we start to get into energetics, which, simply put, energetics is, how do you simply put energetics? Patterns of energy, like how are these herbs affecting your tissues? What patterns are we seeing? So for example, when it is hot AF outside, we naturally want cold foods and drinks like smoothies and popsicles. That's energetics. You're balancing your body out. When it's really cold outside, we want hot stuff like soup, tea, coffee. That's your instincts helping to balance your energetics out. So that's another thing to think about in a formula. Do you want half really cooling and half really warming, stimulating herbs? Not really, because all that's going to be happening then is they're just going to be kind of fighting each other. And more than likely, the underlying issue that you're trying to work on is still just kind of sitting there like, is anybody going to help me? So these are all things to keep in mind. That said, your formula sounds great. Vitex, cramp bark, and ironweed. The only thing I would suggest is when you taste that, if it doesn't taste great, you might need to lessen one of those ingredients, increase one of those ingredients. And like I mentioned, you might want to add a catalyst herb like hibiscus or ginger. But other than that, it sounds great. Next question. Could you provide an herbal broad spectrum antibiotic recipe, or if that doesn't exist, a recipe for something like strep throat? Okay, so first off, I know that there's been some not great things happening with Stephen Harold Bunner lately, so I hate to recommend. Are you guys there? It just closed me out and I've never had that happen. Is everybody here? Shit. I can't. Am I back? Okay, so sorry about that. Back to it. I got to get back to my notes page, so hold on one second. Okay, so I don't know if you all heard what I was saying before I dropped out, but I hate to recommend that you support Stephen Harold Bunner because there's been some not great things that have come out about him. That said, I almost never buy new books, so if you are interested in herbal antibiotics or herbal antivirals, both of these books were written by him. Maybe just buy them used so that you're not supporting him directly. Thrift Books is an amazing used book website. I get most of my books from that website. You can even like put what books you're looking for if they don't have it, and they'll let you know when they're back in stock. So just a suggestion. Anyways, these are like really easy small reads with very simple chapters like these herbs are antibiotic. Here's a simple formula. So you might want to look into that. I will give you my personal opinion that I use. I have 2 different herbal antibiotic formulas that we like. One that we keep the most on hand, that's really great for kids, that's really great if you just kind of feel something starting like a tickle. One is fresh pressed ginger in ice cube trays. That is the absolute best for helping to knock out anything viral, bacterial, etc. Fresh pressed ginger juice, put it in an ice cube, pour hot water over it, bam, so good for you. However, another thing that we keep on hand, this dog, is a fermented garlic and onion honey. You could add ginger to that too, but what I prefer to do is just the fermented garlic and honey, and then I use my fresh pressed ginger separate. You can, of course, use chopped ginger, but y'all, fresh pressed ginger is as good as it gets. Um, and then some herbs like sage, thyme, uh, rosemary, those are all great. Lemon, garlic, ginger. I don't know where lemon just came from, but yeah, you can definitely include lemon in there. Um, Garlic, ginger, onion, rosemary, sage, thyme. That would be like the best simple, basic formula. I think I have a video on making a fermented onion, garlic, honey on Patreon. Um, and then if a more complex formula for if you're like really trying to knock something out, just a good thing to have on hand. Usnea dual extract is going to be my first top pick for that. I know I've got a video on making dual extracts, and I know I've got plenty of videos talking about Usnea. If you have Oregon grapefruit in your area, that's another great one. Echinacea root, wormwood, red root, and licorice. Those are some serious antibiotic herbs. Herbal recipe / regimen to treat the root cause of psoriasis. This is a tough question. I have worked with a ton of people with psoriasis, so I do have a lot to say about this topic. It's a tough one because it's just one of those topics that, like, I don't think that anyone has truly cracked the code on. And people have been trying. So it's just a hard one. It's one of those where most of the things that you're going to find when you research about it are how to treat the symptoms. Meaning, you know, when you have a psoriasis flare up, which psoriasis is an autoimmune thing. So unfortunately, like, flare ups are typically going to be triggered by illnesses, anything that's triggering your immune system. So like strep throat, cold, flu, etc. But a lot of people deal with it every single day, no matter what. I have a very close friend who has it literally from head to toe. And no matter what he does, diet, exercise, topicals, etc., it's very hard for him to manage it. There are things that make it better. And so, for example, if he's drinking beer and eating smoked meats and lots of gluten and dairy, his psoriasis is for sure at its absolute worst. If he cuts out gluten and dairy and is only eating like whole foods, he does a lot better. But it's one of those things where it's not just one system. It's like you need to get your diet right for sure if you're trying to treat the underlying cause of any sort of skin thing, but especially psoriasis. There are autoimmune diets. Personally, anything very rich in fat, using whole fats like tallow and butter instead of any sort of like seed oils and shit, bone broth, collagen, all those things are going to be so good. Whole foods, like go to the farmer's market and buy whole foods, as little processed foods as possible. And then the other things that you really need to do, anything in your house that's super chemically, like laundry detergents, household cleaners, perfumes, that has got to go if you have psoriasis, especially store-bought soaps and conditioners. No, if you have psoriasis, find you an herbalist to support, or be that, and make these items yourself. But you really need to use very simple skin and hair products, cleaning products, etc. Anything that could disrupt your hormones, gotta go. And then, of course, to help like treat and soothe some of the symptoms, um, topical is going to be, your best bet for getting some immediate relief. My favorite herbs, and I have another very close friend in Iceland that has psoriasis head to toe, and we spent a lot of time finding things that worked best for her. I would make infusions and really simple salves and send them to her. She would let me know what worked. And that is actually how our salve cooling pine tallow balm came about. And so my top favorite herbs for psoriasis are going to be the ingredients in that salve, which are violet. Violets are not only super cooling, but they're very rich in saponins, which is great for psoriasis. Pine sap, antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal, yet your skin can still breathe. It's like a shell, it's like an armor for psoriasis. So we really want saponin, mucilaginous, and antioxidant rich herbs. So other things: violet, chickweed, marshmallow root, Irish sea moss, burdock root, and aloe. Those are all going to be some super duper top picks, as well as the pine sap, like I mentioned. Get yourself a pine tar soap. That is gonna be awesome. Or birch tar. Birch tar and pine tar are both incredible for psoriasis, eczema, dermatitis. I would highly suggest switching to the no poo method, like using something like our herbal hair rinse, or just a small amount of apple cider vinegar instead of shampoo and conditioners. You just really want to get as simple as possible with your ingredients that you're not only ingesting but applying. Farah, would I suggest those for eczema? For sure. There a lot of eczema is also up for debate, but it's not quite as intense with its underlying causes being so mysterious as psoriasis. But absolutely cutting out hormone disruptors, eating whole fats, as little processed food as possible, and just getting as simple as you possibly can internally and topically, absolutely going to be very, very helpful. Am I done here? I think so. Okay, I'm on the last question. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. We've got 10 minutes left, so I'd love to answer them. The last question is my favorite ways to use self-heal. The person that asked said they have a ton of self-heal blooming right now. I also have a ton of self-heal getting ready to bloom, and I'm so excited. Self-heal is an amazing herb that I consider, I don't consider it the same, but like I put it on the same pedestal that I put stinging nettle on, in that stinging nettle is just a great umbrella herb, meaning pretty much anything under the under that umbrella it's going to be great for. Like stinging nettle is a major It's super rich in antioxidants, polysaccharides, polyphenols, amino acids, vitamins, minerals. It's anti-inflammatory, and so all those things make it so good for about a million things. Same with self heal. Self heal has a lot going on. It's got so much to offer that honestly, if you have a ton of it, you might as well tincture it, infuse it in witch hazel, infuse it in oil, make it into an oxymel. Because if you've got it in a tincture, you can of course take it or dry it for tea for later. If you've got it infused in oil, you can make a salve from it. You can apply the oil directly. Self heal is also amazing for psoriasis and eczema. It's major anti-inflammatory. It's also very antiviral, antibacterial, antimicrobial. It's wonderful for oral health, gastrointestinal health. You can make a mouthwash from it. You can use the tincture as a mouthwash. That's kind of the cool thing about having something tinctured. Yarrow is another great example. If you have yarrow and self heal as a tincture in your first aid kit, you can, of course, take the tincture, or you can dilute it and apply it topically. You can use it as an oral rinse. You know, it's very multifunctional. Okay. Meant to say I'm still new to Patreon, so I have a ton of content. Curious where to start for PCOS. I'm trying to think if I've talked a lot on PCOS or not. I don't know that I have a video on PCOS. I would definitely recommend looking into the video that I reposted last month about coming off of birth control, and tracking your cycle, because even if you're not coming off of birth control, there's a ton of information in that video about just hormones, herbs for hormones, foods for hormones, etc. And I also posted that with a calendar that Farai shared with us that will help you track your cycle. But as far as where to start for PCOS, PCOS is also autoimmune like, so it's slightly mysterious. I always think about PCOS in the same way that I think about thyroid issues, in that you're either hypothyroid or hyperthyroid. And even though it's the same situation, you know, your thyroid, there are two very opposite spectrums to be on. And with PCOS, you're typically low very low or high in estrogen, or you have way too much DHEA or way too little. So the first thing that you need to do is find that out, because the way you're going to handle that is very dependent on your hormone levels. So let me pull this up really quick. I can send you my favorite test. Of course, if you have insurance and you have a doctor that can do these blood tests for you, it's probably going to be cheaper than paying for these tests. So 1 second. I'm gonna copy and paste some information into this chat for you. Okay, so the Dutch test is amazing. This book I'm about to send you is a great place to start. You can get it on Audible too, if you want to listen to it, which I really like because I'll re-listen to certain chapters, and there is definitely a whole chapter on PCOS. The Zesty Ginger and Clara Bailey are my top favorite herbalists that really specialize in that. And I think that's all my resources for you on where to start. Sorry, 1 second. I'm still looking. You are very welcome. And then, of course, if any specific questions come up, like how can I help do XYZ to get to Z, let me know because I'd be happy to help you. I'm a little more well versed in endometriosis just because that's what I've dealt with. But I've had a lot of people close to me that had PCOS. There's also, let me see if I can pull this up really fast. I might not be able to, but I listened to a phenomenal podcast episode once from a woman that specializes in PCOS. She's a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, and the podcast is called Something Acupuncture. Well, there is a podcast called PCOS Girls that just popped up, so you might want to check that out. Crap. I'm going to search one more thing and then I'm going to give up if I can't find it. Oh, I found it. Okay, so the podcast is called Q Logical. And I'm not going to be able to find the exact episode right now, but you should be able to search wherever you find this podcast, PCOS, and the episode will come up. This OBGYN, this female OBGYN, had PCOS, has recovered from PCOS, has helped a ton of people recover from PCOS. And because there are so limited studies on it, she, being a badass like we talked about earlier, took it upon herself to do a ton of studies herself on PCOS. I will say most of her recommendations are very much around certain foods and whatnot, but that will be a very enlightening episode for you. Okie doke, I'm going to go. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I will be posting the recording as soon as it loads on YouTube after this. Sorry about the internet troubles, and I hope everyone has a great night.